In a quiet town surrounded by forests and distant mountains, there lived a curious boy named Daniel. Daniel loved exploring more than anything else. While most children spent their evenings inside their homes playing games or watching television, Daniel preferred wandering through the small fields and dirt roads outside the village. He loved the peaceful silence of the countryside, the sound of wind moving through tall grass, the distant calls of birds flying home as the sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains. One evening, just as the golden light of sunset covered the land, Daniel was walking along a narrow path that led from the fields back to his house. The setting sun stretched his shadow across the ground, making it long and thin. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal. Daniel walked slowly, enjoying the cool evening breeze. But then something strange happened. Daniel suddenly stopped walking, yet his shadow did not stop. For a moment, the shadow continued moving forward across the path. Just 2 or 3 steps ahead, Daniel blinked in confusion. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The shadow had stopped again, perfectly still on the ground. Daniel felt a small chill run down his back. He told himself it must have been the changing light of the sunset, but something deep inside him felt uneasy. Slowly, Daniel raised his arm. His shadow raised its arm too. Everything looked normal again. Trying to ignore the strange feeling, Daniel continued walking toward home. But just before reaching the gate of his house, something even stranger happened. For a brief moment, his shadow lifted its hand before he did. Only for a split second, but it was enough. Daniel froze. Shadows were not supposed to move first. That night Daniel could not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while moonlight entered through the window. His shadow stretched quietly along the floor beside the bed. Daniel kept looking at it again and again, waiting, watching. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Eventually his eyes became heavy with sleep, but just as Daniel was about to fall asleep, something moved. The shadow shifted slightly across the floor. Daniel sat up instantly. His heart began beating faster, but when he looked again, the shadow was still. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe it was just the movement of clouds across the moon. Still, the strange feeling remained. Over the next few days, Daniel began watching his shadow more carefully. When he walked to school, he looked down constantly. When he played outside, he kept one eye on the ground. Most of the time, the shadow behaved normally, but sometimes it acted strangely. One afternoon, Daniel was walking near the forest when his shadow suddenly stepped backward. Daniel stopped immediately. Just a second later, a heavy tree branch crashed down exactly where he had been about to step. Daniel stared at the broken branch in shock. If he had taken one more step, he might have been seriously hurt. Another day, while crossing the road in the village, his shadow suddenly froze. Daniel stopped moving. Only a moment later, a fast truck rushed past the street. The wind from the vehicle shook the trees along the road. Daniel realized something incredible. His shadow was warning him. It was reacting to danger before he even noticed it. The more Daniel watched, the clearer the pattern became. His shadow was protecting him, but how and why? Confused and curious, Daniel decided to visit the oldest person in the village, an elderly woman named Mira. Mira had lived in the village longer than anyone else. People said she knew many old stories and legends. Daniel knocked on her wooden door one afternoon. When he explained everything that had been happening, Mira listened silently. Her eyes grew thoughtful. Finally she spoke. Long ago, she said slowly, people believed that shadows were not just darkness. Daniel leaned forward. They believed shadows were reflections of another world. Daniel felt a strange excitement. What kind of world? He asked. Myra looked toward the window where sunlight created long shadows on the floor. A world that exists beside ours, she said quietly. In rare moments, when the balance between worlds becomes weak, a shadow may awaken. Daniel's heart began to race. You mean my shadow is alive? Mira shook her head slowly. Not alive in the way you think, but aware. Daniel walked home that evening thinking about her words. Aware, what did that mean? Later that night, Daniel stepped outside under the quiet glow of the streetlights. His shadow stretched across the pavement. Daniel stared at it for a long moment. Then he whispered quietly, "If you are trying to tell me something, show me." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then slowly, the shadow lifted its arm and pointed toward the dark forest outside the village. Daniel swallowed nervously. Was the shadow guiding him somewhere? Taking a deep breath, he decided to follow. Step by step, Daniel walked toward the forest. His shadow moved ahead of him confidently. The deeper they walked into the woods, the quieter the world became. The wind stopped. The insects fell silent. Even the moonlight seemed dimmer beneath the tall trees. Eventually they reached a clearing Daniel had never seen before. In the center stood a circle of ancient stones covered in glowing symbols. A faint blue light pulsed from the ground inside the circle. Daniel stepped closer. The symbols began glowing brighter. Suddenly, Daniel noticed something shocking. The ground inside the circle reflected his shadow, but it did not reflect him. And then something impossible happened. Daniel's shadow slowly lifted off the ground. It stood upright beside him like a dark human shape made of smoke. Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief. The shadow moved toward the center of the stone circle. The glowing symbols brightened as it approached. Daniel suddenly understood. His shadow was not simply protecting him, it was guiding him here. The stone circle was a doorway between two worlds, a world of light and a world of shadows, and somehow Daniel was connected to both. After a moment, the shadows slowly returned to the ground at Daniel's feet. The glowing symbols faded. The forest returned to its normal silence. But Daniel knew one thing for certain: the mystery was not over. Because somewhere beyond the darkness of the forest, beyond the boundary between worlds, other shadows were beginning to awaken, and one day they might come looking for him. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are not hidden in distant planets or deep oceans. Sometimes they follow us everywhere we go, quietly, silently, waiting just behind us. So tonight, when the lights turn on, take a moment to look at your shadow, because you never know when it might decide to move first. If you enjoyed this mysterious story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories and adventures. And remember, some shadows are more than just darkness.